Hello, everybody. Today we're going to talk about the ear, which is responsible for two of our special senses, hearing and balance. So let's start by dividing the ear into three main regions: the external ear, the middle ear, and the internal ear. The external ear includes like what normal people would call the ear, but then also like going down the ear canal all the way until the eardrum. So the eardrum is the boundary between the external ear and the middle ear. The middle ear includes the eardrum right here and all of these little bones. And then finally, the internal ear includes these kind of weird looking things. That's the cochlea, and those are the semicircular canals. We'll label them and talk about them in more detail later. Let's go back and focus on our external ear a little bit. The part of the ear that's visible is called the auricle. Sorry, not the kind that can see the future, the kind that is able to funnel sound waves in. Like if you could kind of picture your ear as sort of like a shell or a cone, and it helps catch sound waves and like send them into your ear like this. The rim of our ear is called the helix. It's this kind of like thicker edge of our ear. And the bottom earlobe part is called the lobule. Let's look at structures. This is made mostly of skin, so epithelial tissue, but inside of it is also cartilage. This blue tissue, that is cartilage, and it's the ear, so it's elastic cartilage, E, glottis, ear, elastic cartilage, and all of this stuff is fat. Notice that the lobule doesn't have any cartilage, and the helix doesn't have any either, so the cartilage is only located in the auricle. So we've got our sound waves coming in. Next, they're going to travel down this tube. This tube is called the external acoustic meatus. Meatus is just a term that means basically a hole going through bone, and acoustic for sound waves. So its job is to basically be an opening where sound waves can travel through. See, this right here is bone. This is the spongy bone, and this is the compact bone. So this is the temporal bone. So we're starting to enter the temporal bone right here. This is skin, so it's going to have all of our normal properties that skin has. For example, it's going to have sebaceous glands that secrete oil or sebum, and it also has modified sweat glands that are called ceruminous glands, and they secrete cerumen or earwax. And the cerumen is sticky, and it helps trap kind of like dirt or little invading things that are trying to get in there. Moving into our middle ear now, notice that we're totally within the temporal bone, and this sort of fan-shaped thing is the tympanic membrane or the eardrum. So when the sound waves travel down the meatus and they strike the tympanic membrane, it vibrates, and then when it vibrates, it causes these three little bones to start vibrating, which then cause these to vibrate. If we stay in our middle ear right here, notice that there's like a tube coming out of it. Like that seems kind of weird. Why is there a tube coming out of our ear? It is supposed to be there. It connects our middle ear to basically our throat. So it's called the pharyngotympanic tube. Pharyngo comes from pharynx. That's what we call our throat. And then tympanic because it is the tympanic membrane. And this tube is normally flat, but it opens up whenever we need to equalize the pressure in our ears. If you've ever been on an airplane or maybe like driving up a high hill or something like that, that sensation of your ear popping, that's actually your pharyngotympanic tube equalizing the pressure. The pressure in the middle ear and the external ear has to be the same, or else it's going to cause the tympanic membrane to like vibrate wrong and it distorts what we're hearing. This is also kind of risky, like having a tube that connects our throat and nose to our ear, because our throat and nose like takes in air and takes in food, so it's taking in a lot of pathogens like bacteria with it. It's pretty common in young children to have an ear infection that traveled up this tube and then starts to affect the ear. When we get older, there's more space between our ear and our throat, and it becomes less common. Okay, so now we're zoomed back into the middle ear. Here's our tympanic membrane, and the bone that articulates with the tympanic membrane is named the malleus. Malleus means hammer because it's supposed to have a hammer shape. So when the tympanic membrane vibrates, it causes the malleus to start vibrating. The hammer strikes the anvil or the incus, this bone right in here, and then the incus causes our little stirrup or our stapes to vibrate. And all of these bones are about the size of a grain of rice, and also little teeny synovial joints right in there because they have to be freely moving and able to vibrate. They're pretty well protected because they're deep in the temporal lobe. Here's another view. So like this, we've been looking at the ear like this, and now pretend that we are like inside the internal ear and we're looking out at the middle ear. So this is what the eardrum looks like from behind. And then here's the malleus, the incus, and the stapes. And this, our smallest ear bones, are supported by some of our smallest skeletal muscles. And when a sound is really loud, they actually reflexively contract, which stops them from vibrating, so they protect us from loud noises. All right, back in here, now we are moving deep into the internal ear, or sometimes it's called the labyrinth. A labyrinth is a maze. So like all of these swirls and all of these swirls. Imagine if like a little worm kind of like drilled or ate holes like through your temporal bone. Like that's your inner ear. It's not really a chamber. It's just all these little holes like within your temporal bone. It's very, very secure because it's basically so far back inside of your skull. The top part that comes out here are called the semicircular canals. There's actually 3 of them, one in each plane, like X, Y, and Z, and they contain fluid. And when we move our head, the fluid moves, and that activates mechanoreceptors that sends information to our brain about where we are. Like if you're sitting up right now, the fluid is like stationary. But then if you go and like turn your head to the right, now that fluid is in a different spot. When it moved, it activated mechanoreceptors and it's sending the information to the brain that we're moving. And part on here is the vestibule. So the stapes actually vibrates on the vestibule, which then transfers it to the semicircular canals. So the vestibule and the semicircular canals are our organs for equilibrium or balancing. And then we have the cochlea. So when the stapes vibrates, it also sends vibrations going through the cochlea. This is our hearing organ. And by the way, these yellow things coming off are nerves. So this is a view of what we just looked at, but it's kind of like they tried to cut it out so you can actually see it. So there is 2 labyrinths here. There's a bony labyrinth and a membranous labyrinth. So this hole in the bone right there is the bony labyrinth, and this blue tube is the membranous labyrinth, and it's basically a tube that holds fluid that allows it to vibrate. And then notice when it vibrates, it's going to be able to send the signal to the nerve to get to the brain. And same thing down here, we have a membranous labyrinth inside of a bony labyrinth, and then I'm going to show you another image inside of there. So this has had the semicircular canals removed. They would be like right over here. And this kind of unfolds the cochlea so we can see what happens. So back here, we're going to take this and we're going to unfold it so we can focus on it. So as a quick review, the auricle funnels the sound waves into our meatus. The waves travel down the meatus and they strike the tympanic membrane. When they make it vibrate, it causes the auditory ossicles to vibrate, and each time they vibrate, they amplify the pressure. So it's actually kind of like making it louder. It's making it easier for our ear to be able to detect what's going on. Then the vibration goes over here into what would be the vestibule and the cochlea. If we keep following it here into the cochlea, it's going to vibrate hair cells that are in this fluid. And 4A is for frequencies below hearing. So all the way in there and then back out because we can't hear them. And then sounds that we can hear, 4B, are going to vibrate and cause a reaction. There's a nice video about how the ear works. And this is a hilarious video of actual ear cells moving in response to music. I recommend that. And here's a fun hearing test for you. Thank you. Let me know what other questions you have.